Okay, this is a sort of test video to see if this is the kind of content I want to make. However, I just could not share this story because it's truly bizarre and something that entirely blindsided people while at the same time making 100% sense. And it's also my first foray into really experiencing this kind of thing in a game, and I really wanted to highlight it. So ladies, gentlemen, all in between, and every single one of you beautiful bastards, I'm going to talk about one of the stories that happened from my campaign, and the first time I'm really going to focus a video on it. So let's get started. As anyone who has ever told a story from their campaign knows, the first thing you've got to do is give some context. So, we're playing in a world that is heavily inspired by the works of Studio Ghibli alongside Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. The core of this setting is that everybody is living on a plateau that is several miles in the air, and no one has been down to the surface in many hundreds of years. The circumstances of this plateau happening are unknown, though everybody does know that there was an event called the Blight, caused by a race of elves that probably wiped out all life on the surface, though nobody knows for sure. The party is trying to find a way off the plateau, and they're funded by a very shady patron known as Balthazar. They've been traveling for some time trying to figure things out, and along the way they found a cursed dagger, which Balthazar insisted was probably part of a key in order to be able to discover how to get off the plateau. Now this dagger is, dangerous to say the least. The very first time anybody picked it up, they were immediately cursed with a curse that caused them to have to eat double the amount of rations every single night. And though the party never discovered this, and I am certain that some of my party will watch this video, so this will hit them with a surprise, every time that they got into combat, I made a roll for them to see if they were affected by the second part of the curse. Fortunately, they never were, but the curse caused them every single round to have to take a bonus action to bite the nearest creature near them. Extra damage? Yay! Cannibalism, not so great. But this was not the only thing going on with this dagger. There was a sentient entity inside that would sometimes suck the minds and souls of people into it so that it could converse with them. And it was nasty. It spoke about the need to be able to consume their souls, to devour them. It was so hungry and was just waiting for its chance to strike. It consistently talked about how it was going to feed on them, and they would be delicious. So yeah, not the friendliest of items. But they had to keep it on them, and so keep it on them they did, dealing with the curse and just generally trying not to interact with the creature. Save for, that is, the Goliath who originally picked it up, because they really wanted to talk to this creature. They were very intrigued by them, to say the least. A smart decision? No, but roleplay decisions are very rarely smart. So with that context, this story is about a very strange relationship with this weapon, because they took it in and took it down to these ancient dwarven ruins in order to figure out what was going on. Now there was a lot of weird hijinks when it came to this ruins, etc., but the ultimate conclusion that it came down to was that there was something going on in the ruins that related to what happened to the Blight and the creation of the plateau. They had to go through 3 separate chambers and finish 3 separate trials in order to be able to get out of this place and discover what they wanted. The dagger seemed intrinsically tied to this. At one point they actually found a piece of the dagger that was supposed to go onto it to make it sort of a short sword instead of a dagger itself. And in doing so, when they placed it on, the entity inside began to change. Later on in the last challenge, of which they all had to stand in a zone of truth and talk to each other before deciding whether they would go into these different chambers and drink 2 different types of potions. One of the potions would kill everyone in the party but them, the other potion would allow everybody to move on to the next chamber. The entire point of the challenge was basically asking the question, did the party trust each other? They could all choose to drink this potion that didn't kill them and move on to the next chamber, but if even one of them drank the one on the left, everybody else died and they got the treasure at the end of this all to themselves. Now, side note, if you're a new DM, don't do this. It is very dangerous to put that in front of your players because if any of them choose to kill the other party members, that's just not fun. That's terrible. But I did this one because I really trusted my party. I knew they would not do that. Everybody wanted to have fun. But 2, I let them know out of game. If they did drink the left potion, it would not kill everybody. But it would lead to a bad consequence for everybody else and a good consequence for them. Again, very dangerous to do, but I trusted my party, and true enough to form, they all took the potion on the right and moved on to the next chamber. Funny side note, the zone of truth on the ground didn't actually do anything. They all just trusted it intrinsically and started telling the truth until one person tried to lie and figured it out. But anyways, after completing this 3rd trial, they completed the sword. And they then got to go into this huge room, and the treasure at the end of the tunnel was basically this amazing astral observatory the elves had created long ago, which allowed them free castings of legend lore on specific things. It was essentially a large exposition drop, but the party had been looking for information for so long, this treasure was exactly what they were looking for. But that's not what the story is about. I'm talking about the sword. See, when they completed the sword, the creature inside began to talk to all of them, not just the one carrying it, and it was different. It seemed to be more benevolent, stronger, more powerful, and a little bit more all-knowing. It let them know that its name was Maw of Raven, and it would be there to assist them in being able to use this new artifact they found to cast legend lore. But with all that context out of the way, this is quite honestly the beginning of this very strange story. See, after all this had happened, they returned back to where they had come from, found out that there was some sort of time shenanigans happening, it's a long story, met back with the other adventuring party that they had been traveling with, and headed back to camp. Many heavy roleplay conversations were had, some heartfelt moments occurred, even some of the more prickly characters ended up coming out of their shell. It was nice. However, that night, as the wielder of the sword, the druid Goliath, fell asleep, he found the entity speaking to him in his dreams. See, prior to this, every time that somebody died near the dagger, it absorbed their soul, and nobody knows what happened to it after that. But the dagger informed the druid that he would no longer be eating souls. It was no longer the food that he desired. Now he wanted dreams, unrealized potential. He wanted to eat the druid's dreams, and in return, he would help the druid out in his quests, and so the druid accepted. After all, this druid was never one to stray away from the more chaotic nature, and he always wanted to find out more, so anything that was interesting, he did. Honestly, one of the best player characters to have in a campaign. But as the conversation wound to a close, something odd happened. The creature spoke to him and told him, "Don't you mind what happens next." And then we cut to the bard. See, this bard had held this dagger prior. She held it when it was much more dangerous and feral, it seemed, and it had constantly threatened her that it would eat her, consume her soul. So imagine how terrified she would be when she woke up and the druid was standing over her in a sort of sleepwalking state with pure black eyes, and it spoke with the timbre and accent of the creature within the sword. "Good evening. I wanted to take a second to be able to talk to you about something." Immediately she jumped up, frightened, as anybody would be, and this is where the conversation took a turn that maybe she didn't expect. The sword apologized to her, let her know that it was sorry as it had memories of threatening to consume her before, and that was untoward of it. It was different now. It had grown and learned that that was probably a socially unacceptable thing to do, and she just kind of stared in shock and thanked it for its honesty. The two then had a conversation where they kind of explained to each other, who they were, what they were doing, and it was in the course of this conversation that something very strange happened. There were constant mentions of this creature's gender, and I don't know why. I guess just, it spoke with a very low accent that kind of implies that it was male of some sort, and there were a few different comments that it made that point towards the fact of it being male. But when it was talking to the druid, it made a comment along the lines of "a growing boy has gotta eat." And the druid asked, "Are you a boy?" And the creature stopped and said, "I don't know what I am yet." See, he'd only existed for a very small amount of time, and when talking with the bard, there were comments about the fact that it was inhabiting a male body. And it became so interesting because for the first time, I began to realize what it was like to not know what your gender is. This creature had no clue what it was. And as it looked down at itself and looked at the body it was currently inhabiting, this eldritch sword being sheepishly admitted that it did not feel comfortable in the body it was currently in. It was so eye-opening to be able to sit there as an NPC and realize how somebody might come to that conclusion, how somebody might feel that way, and how uncomfortable that might be. But nonetheless, he informed the bard of his preferred name, not the name that was given to the sword. He informed them that Maw of Raven was a name that it had chosen for itself, and it preferred to just go by Raven. The bard then shared that she did not actually go by her real name and gave him her preferred name, and the two parted ways. The druid went back down to sleep, never knowing that its body had been inhabited by this sword, and the bard went to go talk to the monk of the party. And that's where things took a turn I really just didn't expect. See, I was not aware of it at the time, but not one, not two, but 3 of the members in the party were actually asexual. The druid, the monk, and the bard, all 3 which were involved in this situation. And as the bard went to go talk to the monk and they spoke about feelings and what it was like to have a crush, it slowly dawned on me what was happening. Neither of them really knew exactly what it was like to have a crush, but for the first time, the bard was having romantic feelings towards an eldritch sword deity that had gender identity conflict. I was not prepared for this. In fact, during the Zoom call, I just straight up turned off my camera because I was laughing so hard. But the more that I looked at it, the more it made sense. I mean, if you have no sexual attraction to anything, why not have an intellectual attraction to an ancient sword deity that is just now figuring out its personality and, more importantly, has a ton of knowledge? Now, as of the time of recording this video, there actually has not been development on this. We haven't had another session yet. It just kind of blindsided me and happened pretty recently, but I wanted to get it out there because I thought it was so interesting, and I wanted to highlight a point on it specifically. I made a video about representation in Critical Role, and that was a pretty popular video, but in that video, I make the point that representation is there because it is important to be there, because it allows people who have not experienced these things to know that they exist. Had I have not made that video and had not been exposed to representation of so many different forms, I never would have taken a thought or a moment to look at this deity and this sword and think, I don't think they know what their gender is. I would never have thought that because I have always been very confident in my gender, which is it's a blessing because anybody who is not has to deal with a ton in order to be able to figure out how to be comfortable in their own bodies. But because of that comfortability that I have, I never would have thought that maybe this sword had gender identity issues. But because of the representation and the logical conclusion of why would this thing know its gender, I was able to put myself in those shoes, to experience that and make that part of a character. And I'll be honest, I'm kind of excited about it. I'm excited to explore that and to be able to understand that more and to create this, well, very natural form of representation in a character. And I'm very excited to be able to give the chance to these asexual characters to experience something like this. So yeah, moral of the story is representation is important, and I'm very excited to see it happen in my game. I don't usually do storytime videos like this, but I don't know, I thought it was very interesting, and a lot of people seem to show interest in stories from my campaign, so if you like this, please leave a like and comment, and let me know if you want me to do more. I have tons of stories to talk about. But anyways, thanks for coming by. Go out into the world and make it your own, you beautiful bastards. Don't forget to have a wonderful day, and never forget to play a role. Thank you. Come again.